Good evening, I'm Anna Kalczyńska and this is World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. Russia lost over 1 million soldiers since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That's according to Kiev's figures. Despite the alleged losses, the Kremlin continues to strike Ukrainian civilian targets. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at the latest headlines. Weimar Plus countries call for sanctions on Russia and further development of defense capabilities. At the GLOBSEC forum, European officials meet in Prague to debate defense spending. Questions swirl around the future of the Polish national football team following the head coach's resignation. More than 1 million Russian soldiers have been killed since the start of the invasion, claims Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. This comes amid conflicting messages from top U.S. administration officials regarding Russia. Marek Steele reports.
Russia targeted Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, for a second consecutive night with Shahed drones. 18 people were wounded in the aftermath, including 4 children.
What we witness now, we witness Russia continuing terror actions and deliberately attacking Ukrainian civilian infrastructure every day and every night, using complex attacks, including drones, missiles.
The war in Ukraine has taken a devastating toll both on civilians and soldiers. The Ukrainian military has published the latest figures from the front line. Kyiv reports that since launching the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Moscow lost 1,340,000 soldiers in combat.
This is the price Putin and those like him are willing to pay for their sick geopolitical fantasies. 1 million losses, and still they are doing everything to avoid ending this war. They even ignore the United States and President Trump, who have repeatedly called for a ceasefire and an end to the killings.
Since Monday, Kyiv and Moscow have been exchanging prisoners of war. But that's the only real outcome of the peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, which seem to have stalled. In spite of this, analysts see a positive change in President Zelensky's approach to the talks and to President Trump himself.
I think it's a better approach, meaning it's less confrontational. He has shown that he and Ukraine are willing to come to the table. Ukraine wants peace. That's the bottom line. That's always been the reality. And that the only party that's an obstacle to peace, which President Trump also wants, is Mr. Putin and Russia.
This sentiment is also shared by notable anti-Kremlin activists.
Do you believe that Vladimir Putin is serious about peace?
Well, of course not. And frankly, I don't see how anybody in the West can even think like this. I mean, Vladimir Putin's the one who started this war. Ukraine presented no threat to Russia. There was no national interest, and there are no national interests of the Russian Federation involved in the war in Ukraine. This is the decision of the dictatorial, unelected, autocratic regime by Vladimir Putin.
And yet, the Trump administration's approach toward the Kremlin remains inconsistent. On the one hand, Pete Hegseth, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, who was grilled on Wednesday by both Democratic and Republican senators, admitted that Russia was the aggressor. On the other, however, as if nothing happened, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio congratulated the Russian people in an official statement issued on Russia Day.
We also take this opportunity to reaffirm the United States' desire for constructive engagement with the Russian Federation to bring about a durable peace between Russia and Ukraine.
For TVP World, I'm Marek Steele.
And stay tuned for an interview with Oleksiy Chernykhov, Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, at the end of World News Tonight. As Russia continues to ramp up its war on aggression in Ukraine, Kyiv's European allies have repeated commitments of support. Meeting in Rome, foreign ministers from Italy, Poland, France and Germany said Europe would increase its pressure on Moscow if needed. Our correspondent Alex Cadier has been following the meeting and joins me now from Brussels. Alex, what can Europe do to ramp up the pressure on Vladimir Putin's regime?
Well, good evening. That was the big question of that meeting in Rome, the Weimar Plus format, as it's known. Poland, Germany, France, Italy. The foreign ministers there meeting with Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, as well as Kaja Kallas, the EU's top diplomat. Now, the statement from those foreign ministers says they are reiterating their readiness to step up the pressure on Russia as it continues to refuse a serious and credible commitments. And they said that they will also ramp up sanctions if they have to. Now, we know there is an 18th package, a new package of sanctions, which has been proposed by the European Union. That will now be debated by member states. And that includes a price cap on the price of Russian oil, the price at which European Union countries can and will buy that Russian oil proposed down to $45. Well, actually, in the last few moments, the Reuters news agency reporting that most G7 countries, which of course includes Germany, Italy and France, say they are willing to do that, to move on that price cap, even without the United States. So we're seeing a concerted effort from European powers proposing more sanctions or this price cap on oil and a number of other measures. We heard the reasoning behind that from Radoslaw Sikorski, the foreign minister of Poland, at that meeting in Rome. Let's have a listen to what he said.
The strategy of Putin's regime remains unchanged and is based on feigning diplomatic efforts, escalating demands, and launching barbarous attacks on Ukraine's civilian population. These are classic Muscovite tactics and tricks, and we should not fall for them.
Well, as I said, sanctions are one option, but here in Brussels, European officials are all too aware that European sanctions are limited by one man. Viktor Orban of Hungary, the Prime Minister of Hungary, has repeatedly frustrated and blocked any new sanctions on Russia, and we're not clear as to whether or not Hungary will continue to do so, which means there is a glass ceiling, of course, on the European Union's ability to put sanctions when it comes to that oil price cap, promising that the G7 countries say they will go without the United States. But it is crucial to have Donald Trump on board. Now, I was at a conference earlier today with Keith Kellogg, the U.S.-Russia envoy for the President of the United States. He was asked, are there any red lines that Vladimir Putin can cross? Is there anything he can do that would make Donald Trump say, enough, we're going to take action? Keith Kellogg said there's only one person in the world who knows that. It's Donald J. Trump, and it's in his head. So the U.S. position at the moment doesn't seem to be leaving the mind of Donald Trump. And that, in part, is why we've seen this action from these European powers, getting ready for more sanctions. One more thing to add, Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, striking a rather realistic and tone at this conference, saying that Europe still has a military production problem. He said we have to produce more. There's a real shortfall in ammunition production in the European Union, and that industrial base has to be built because at the moment ordering something like a Patriot air defense missile can take 10 years. Time, he says, the European Union and Europe simply does not have.
Alex Cadier, thank you so much. This is from Brussels. And now, European defense capabilities and spending were also on everyone's mind at the GLOBSEC forum in Prague, as public and private sector representatives met to discuss the most immediate challenges for European defense and military industry. Funding for European defense is also set to dominate the agenda of the upcoming NATO Hague summit, where addressing capabilities gaps is poised to be one of the main topics for discussion. Our defense correspondent Zuzanna Jurek was on site and has more.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged European allies to significantly step up their drone production capabilities. His statement came during the GLOBSEC forum currently underway in Prague, where policymakers, politicians as well as industry representatives met to discuss some of the most pressing issues currently pressing the European defense sector, apart from financing and funding, streamlining of aggravated demand, as well as ensuring that the supply chains which we have are robust and resilient, were on top of the agenda. However, apart from those three sections, the capabilities, or rather lack thereof, remained on top of the discussions, particularly in light of the momentum which is expected from the EU safe loans mechanism, which serves to address some of those. Apart from that, President Zelensky also outlined how the European allies could learn from the example of Ukraine when it comes to expanding their production capabilities.
Ukraine is ready to increase drone production by 40% in the near future, already this year. Now our factories have the capacity. What we lack is financing. And this must be addressed. And I urge your countries to treat drones production with the same urgency and attention that we do.
Additionally, this forum comes just a few weeks before the NATO summit at The Hague, where NATO allies are expected to agree on a new defense spending of 5% of their GDP, something which the US Trump administration has pushed strongly forward, and alongside European allies taking greater responsibility for their own defenses. The Czech president, however, has underlined that the decision to boost defense spending to 5% of their GDP is not driven by political alliances, but rather by strategic planning.
Let me start with the figures. These figures are not set to satisfy Donald Trump. They are the result of defense planning. And I recently visited NATO HQ and Supreme Allied Commander Europe, and he clearly demonstrated that once we calculate all of the requirements as set by NATO defense planning cycle 25 to 29, it results to 3.6% of GDP. When it comes to Russia, some European allies would like to see stronger language on Russia. But at the same time, you will hear that Russia is considered to be the biggest and most urgent threat to NATO. So I think we clearly understand all of these requirements are aimed at defending or deterring Russia.
Based on the conversations which were had today, however, one thing is clear. Europe must do more and must do it quickly in order to ensure that the freed up funds, both on the EU as well as NATO level, are spent where the gaps are most prominent, and they need to do it together. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
The European Union sanction chief, David O'Sullivan, has criticized U.S. President Donald Trump's administration for delaying the appointment of sanctions envoy in Washington. In an exclusive interview with TVP World, the Brussels diplomat said that the longer the delay, the more complicated sanction synchronization against Russia becomes. More from our EU correspondent Angela Skujins in the Belgian capital.
The European Union official tasked with spearheading the bloc's sanctions against Russia is David O'Sullivan. Now, he was appointed the top job in 2023 and has overseen a large chunk of those approved 17 sanctions packages. Now, as the EU is in the midst of discussing the 18th package since that country's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, international efforts continue to also ramp up. But David O'Sullivan told TVP World in an exclusive sit-down interview that those efforts are hampered and hamstrung by the US government, led by US President Donald Trump, delaying on appointing an appropriate and permanent sanctions envoy.
We can certainly wait a little longer for the appointment of the officials, but of course, the longer it goes on, the more complicated it then becomes.
Now, the acting US sanctions coordinator is David Gamble Jr. He has held this position since January 2025, a hangover of the administration led by former President Joe Biden. But this is only an acting position. We are still waiting for US President Donald Trump to officially nominate another politician. It will then go to the Senate for a formal vote. So while we're not sure, while this effort has been delayed across that side of the Atlantic, according to media reports, particularly what is being published in the Washington Times newspaper, we are hearing senior officials from the Oval Office reportedly telling senators to water down their own proposed sanctions bills, aiming to bring the Kremlin to its knees to continue to put pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin to end the war and to find a ceasefire. But this is not the end of those sanctions conversations. We have heard various European leaders call for the implementation of this 18th package, hopefully by the summer, while we have no idea what the timeline is just yet. According to David O'Sullivan, these will be hard, they'll be robust and aim to target Russia's military, financial and energy sectors. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
Kosovo agreed to a request from the United States to temporarily accept up to 50 third-country migrants a year. It's not the first time Pristina has cut a deal with a foreign government over the relocation of migrants, a policy that could place the Balkan country in a special position in view of accession to the EU. Sonia Gatabishchan explains.
A gesture of camaraderie. Kosovo accepted the United States' request to temporarily take up to 50 third-country migrants per year, with the goal of arranging a safe return to their home country.
These deals, they do not concern a large amount of migrants. So the idea is not to actually address migration flows, but it's rather to have these symbolic policies. So to show that some states are tough on migration.
And for Kosovo, it shows that it is a good friend to the United States. It shows a level of gratitude also. It was a US-led NATO intervention in 1999 that liberated Kosovo from what Kosovars felt was Serbian occupation.
But Kosovo is also cutting deals with European partners. In 2022, it reached a €200 million agreement with Copenhagen, arranging for the reception of up to 300 foreign prisoners sentenced in Denmark. The deal was ratified in 2024, with the first relocation of convicts expected by 2027.
After signing the agreement, we've received many requests from various European countries to sign similar agreements with staggering sums, but we haven't discussed them yet, nor do we intend to. Not because we don't have available space, but because we already have plenty of work to do for our own country.
And inquiries to host third-party nationals seem to be trending in the region. Following a migrants deal with Italy, Kosovo's neighbor Albania also received similar requests. During a May visit, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer discussed the topic with his Albanian counterpart, Edi Rama.
To be very frank with you, we have been asked by several countries if we were open to it, and we said no, because we are loyal to the marriage with Italy, and the rest is just love.
The original Italy-Albania deal involved transferring rescued migrants to Albanian detention centers, but it faced legal difficulties. Nonetheless, the prospect still appeals to some.
So the idea that a problem that is essentially Italy's or the European Union's problem will be outsourced, if you will, to another country, very often in return for very substantial financial contributions.
And such deals can be made even more attractive amid aspirations of accession to the European Union, which have been of interest to both Kosovo and Albania. In late May, the UK announced talks with Kosovo about hosting their return hubs. Kosovo reportedly expressed an openness to these discussions.
The idea of having cooperation and agreements with important international partners might be seen as a way to have a new and a different role, also in view of accessing the EU. So to present themselves as partners with which the US or the EU can engage.
Return hubs are even being considered by the European Union. The EU Fundamental Rights Agency warned that the planned hubs may not be rights-free zones. Even if located outside the Union, EU's fundamental rights would still apply there. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatabishchan.
The head coach of the Polish national football team was forced out after a conflict with the team's superstar, Barcelona striker Robert Lewandowski. Following Poland's loss to Finland in a World Cup qualifier, coach Michał Probierz said he was not resigning, but his position had become untenable after Lewandowski said he would leave the team for as long as the coach remained in charge. The resignation of Probierz paves the way for Lewandowski's possible return to the squad, as it faces huge odds to qualify for the upcoming 2026 World Cup. Kazimierz Wysiak has more.
Taking away the captainship of Robert Lewandowski just before the crucial game against Finland was definitely a bold move by Michał Probierz, the Polish national team head coach. After suffering a disappointing defeat, Probierz kept a brave face.
I definitely have no intention to resign or anything like that.
Only to face the music a day later.
I have come to the conclusion that in the current situation, the best decision for the good of the national team is for me to resign from the position of coach.
He is yet another coach who tried to butt heads with Polish superstar Robert Lewandowski and failed, taking away Lewandowski's captainship just before a crucial World Cup qualifier game caused the Barcelona striker to present the federation with an ultimatum.
Considering the circumstances and the loss of trust in the coach of the Polish national team, I decided to resign from playing on the team as long as he is the coach.
4 days later, Probierz is gone, and while Lewandowski puts on a poker face,
Probierz has resigned. Will he come back now?
I'm preoccupied with other things now.
It's clear he's got what he wanted, and that opens the way for his national team return. Whether Probierz was right to take away his captain's armband or not, that doesn't matter when you go up against a man who's essentially already a living legend. Lewandowski scored the most goals for the Polish national team ever, with 85, which is the third best tally in international European competitions in history, only behind Romelu Lukaku and Cristiano Ronaldo. He scored more than 700 goals in his entire career for both club and country and won 13 European championships.
You have to find a common language with your biggest player, and you have to work together, you have to cooperate. We know that Robert Lewandowski, like others, great captains of national teams like Luka Modric, like Cristiano Ronaldo or any others, they have big egos, they are really confident.
The question that now remains is who comes next? The Polish Federation needs to find a new head coach before September, when the team is facing off against its toughest opponent in the World Cup qualifiers, the Netherlands.
I think it has to be a poll. There are a few names: Nawałka, Brzęczek, Urban or Magiera. I don't rule out bringing back a previous coach. Anything can happen.
But the top contender is rumored to be Jan Urban, an experienced coach who used to lead several of the top Polish clubs, as well as the Spanish Osasuna. He has also worked with big stars in the past.
Jan Urban had no problem in cooperating, working, talking with them, and on the other hand, in getting on with younger Polish and foreign players. So he seems to be the right man for the right place.
Whoever fills the position of the head coach of the Polish national team will need to clean up the PR mess left behind by Michał Probierz and Robert Lewandowski, as well as rebuild the morale of the team. Poland will play against the Netherlands on September 9th. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
And summer is ahead of us. But now let's get back to the main topic today. The situation in Ukraine has obviously been in the center of attention at the Global Forum in Prague. Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Dowman, has talked to the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, Oleksiy Chernyshov.
You're watching TVP World's special coverage from the GLOBSEC Forum in Prague. And with me now for an exclusive interview is Oleksiy Chernyshov, Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine and Minister of National Unity of Ukraine. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Aaron.
So where do you see the peace process at the moment? We've seen these talks between officials in Istanbul, in the Middle East. Is Vladimir Putin showing any openness to peace?
Peace process, a great question. What we witness now, we witness Russia continuing terror actions and deliberately attacking Ukrainian civilian infrastructure every day and every night, using complex attacks, including drones, missiles, both ballistics and cruise. That is the daily life and daily scenario. Only the strength can motivate Russia to be at the table. Otherwise, we will be still witnessing this scenario. I think here, during the GLOBSEC, we are discussing the joint actions. I think European Union, US, Canada, UK, Japan should stand together and to increase sanctions, to deprive Russia from their incomes from energy, also to develop the freezing asset mechanism, and to do more and to be more active This is the only way. But if you would ask us, Ukrainians, whether Ukrainians are willing to have peace, I think no one in the world wants peace more than Ukraine and Ukrainians.
Can you see a world where Russia comes to the table and in good faith negotiates a peace agreement?
Well, I think the moment, as President Zelensky says, Russia understands only one language, the language of strength. And once our joint actions of civilized West or united West will be more active and more clear and more direct, I think that is the moment when Russia will be motivated, will be at the table.
You mentioned the united front and the importance of unity of countries supporting Ukraine around the world. If you had the likes of Donald Trump here around the table and other leaders, what is your message to them?
Stay strong and continue supporting Ukraine. That is the only message. We should go ahead in tackling and resisting Russian aggression like Ukraine is doing this every single minute. And I think we have demonstrated our ability to stand strong during this more than 3 years of the full-scale invasion into Ukraine.
How important to Ukraine is a path to EU or NATO accession?
It is absolutely critical and crucial for sovereign Ukraine to be part of the European family, to be part of the European Union. I think future Ukraine existing as a part of the EU. Obviously, significant measures in order to develop security for Ukraine, of course, lays in the framework on future NATO accession.
Ukrainians living abroad, you're also the Minister of National Unity. How important are Ukrainians living abroad? Those Ukrainians that have had to flee Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion, how important are they to Ukraine standing strong as a united front?
Thank you for addressing this question. We have now more than 30 million Ukrainians within the controlled territory of Ukraine and around 25 million abroad. And I would like to say that we value each and single Ukrainian around the world. And it's important for us to keep connected with each other, to develop links, and to support Ukrainians abroad. Of course, we would welcome Ukrainians to come back and to encourage them once the war is over. And many of them dream about that. Meanwhile, it will definitely depend on a stable peace and on economic development of our country that we will do everything to achieve. And we would like to keep this connection with Ukrainian society throughout the globe. And we are doing this every day.
How important is Ukraine's relationship with Washington, with President Trump, given America's military might?
Absolutely important, absolutely crucial. And I believe U.S. has its major role in future context of Ukrainian solution and the peacemaking process. Today, during the opening session of GLOBSEC, a moderator has put a question to the audience whether the peace can be achieved by EU only or with the participation of EU and US. And obviously the answer, the majority has answered the second scenario. US is definitely needed.
And very briefly to end, are you worried about some of Donald Trump's rhetoric, about some of his relationship building with Vladimir Putin, that he seems to be giving the Russian leader at times the benefit of the doubt?
I think he understands the real picture and he is very smart and intelligent to overview the objective situation and the way the Russians might be playing through their diplomatic ways and the way they used to do it over the years. I think it's clear and he will understand it.
Oleksiy Chernyshov, Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine and Minister of National Unity of Ukraine, thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Aaron.
And that's all for this exclusive interview here on TVP World from the GLOBSEC Forum in Prague. Do stay with us. I'm Aaron Darman. Goodbye for now.
Aaron Darman from Prague. And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. I'm Anna Kalczyńska. Thank you so much for watching and please stay tuned to TVP World for more news and commentaries.